I think that was also for old-timey radios. I have these calibrated so they pick up closer to our faces so we don't pick up each other's.
Sandwiches.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say.
We're looking good, I think. More or less. I think.
Speak for yourself. I look awful.
I mean, I have to say, it's not often I audibly see Nathan wearing shorts in the daytime, but here we are.
Well, that's because I was at home and it's like 80-something and the AC wasn't running because it wasn't on.
It was turned to heat mode for some reason, which meant,
The opposite of what we want.
yeah,
In-
which
Well, the heat was most certainly not running,
no,
Right.
but
the
it was
the
nonetheless
cooling
not in the mode
to
of
cool.
cooling.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
precisely.
That wasn't very cool of you, House.
No,
Not very cash money, as it were.
as
Actually,
You
know,
know, it
not
is
having the
more
heat,
cash
it is
money.
more cash money.
yeah, as we were previously discussing, there were a few times where I was like, man, why are we talking about this now? This is content. But you know what? We're allowed to have regular conversations.
We can be friends without recording it. You believe we're
Right?
friends off camera?
Totally.
Or not camera.
Off
Off microphone.
Off mic.
off ear camera.
The camera of the ear. No, they have those for like surgeries and stuff, I imagine. There's got to be specific ear cameras. Or at least like those long tube ones
For
that they'll thread up
scoping.
your nose or whatever.
For scoping stuff.
Yeah.
I reckon so.
I reckon.
I reckon.
I reckon.
Speaking of reckoning,
Kingdoms of Amalur.
sure. Actually nothing to do with reckoning at all, but we haven't started watching it yet. But Kenobi's out today as of recording this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having anticipated for a
who
while.
knows, it may have something to do with reckoning.
It might.
Maybe we'll finally figure out what happened to Aura Singh.
That's true, as we were discussing last night. And Asajj Ventress.
Mhm.
Those are two female antagonists from Clone Wars.
yeah.
That they never really established what the heck happened to them.
I mean, I think it would be odd to address that in the Kenobi show. I mean, him and Ventress had a kind of a rivalry thing going, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I don't know if...
They've brought back Clone Wars characters in every other of the Star Wars series on
And
Disney
she's
Yeah.
the only one
so
so far that hasn't really been brought back in some way.
Could, yeah, I don't know.
I feel like of the two, Asajj Ventress is the more likely to reappear.
But we're also like... We also have Inquisitors in that show. And I'm like, don't crowd it with red lightsabers.
Yeah.
We had a nice conflict between, well, I guess Cad Bane fit more seamlessly into his conflict than, you know, Aura
Because he
might,
had a
or
history,
Ventress might.
Boba and I.
I mean, Aura hangs out on Tatooine, so maybe that's
Tatooine.
the thing. But if Ventress shows up anywhere, or even Aura, I feel like Bad Batch or something like that might be more appropriate.
Yeah. Because she's sort of in a similar boat to Ahsoka, where she's sort of forsaken the order of Force users that forsook her and trying to find her own way, but in a perhaps more chaotic, evil sort of...
Which is kind of also the arc of Darth Maul.
yeah.
Has been thoroughly concluded. We will not be seeing him in...
Although Ventress has very little to do with... she's not driven by revenge since Dooku's dead.
No.
What else is... shoot, I just had a thought. Although at the time of the Kenobi show, by the appearance of it, his showdown with Maul hasn't happened yet.
Right.
So...
'Cause Rebels is like only a couple of years pre-Battle of Yavin.
Mhm.
Or like as the Rebel Alliance forms.
Yeah. So it'll probably be... It could, at most, I would imagine, be like referenced. It doesn't seem like it'll play any major role.
Are we also getting that Andor show later this year?
I saw there was a sneak peek released, but I haven't seen it yet.
Because that also has a very narrow window to exist between the ending of Rebels and the beginning of Rogue One.
Mm-hmm.
Although if they have K2SO in there, I kind of don't care. I'll watch it for him.
Yeah, we could all use a little more potassium sulfate in our lives. Of course, that would be if he was K2SO4, but
right.
Yeah.
I forget what there is a name for that. K2.
sulfite
No, sulfite is I think
2. Okay.
Ide is 3.
Uh-huh.
And I forget what 1 is because it doesn't happen much.
No.
But it would be cool.
Chemists in the audience, if you're listening.
And we know you are.
And we know
Email
you are.
us at Davis.
For the chemical name of K2SO.
The robot from Rogue One, A Star Wars Story.
Mm-hmm. What else? There's a lot of new things coming out right now, being late May. The new Top Gun movie is out. I mean, I saw the first one. It was all right. As someone who generally likes military aviation, though, I'm way more excited about this one because they actually filmed it in real jets. So,
Neat.
Tom Cruise aside, I've heard this one's even better than the first one, which isn't saying much, but it's given how people
I mean,
highly regard the first one.
Cobra Kai pulled that kind of move too.
Right.
True.
They made the 80s version of the thing way better than the 80s version of the thing was.
Right.
So
It's not common, but you can
it can be done.
it can be done. You can sequelize something from the 80s and have it actually surpass the original.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't happen very often at all, but when it does,
The record shows that it usually doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to see Top Gun, and that's something I want to see in theaters because I feel like that's probably the best way to
the theater
experience that.
experience with the jets stuff.
Right. And then also Doctor Strange. Haven't come up with an opportunity to watch that yet. I want to see it because it's I'm not like incredibly optimistic about it. I think it could be good, and it seems like it's a movie that's like, okay, this is where we're going with the MCU now, kind of a bellwether movie.
Which is unfortunate because I wanted a sequel to Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
You know?
And not just an MCU narrative continuation.
Yeah.
Or another chance to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Because I feel like that's where the MCU is right now. It doesn't know where to go post Endgame, and they're just throwing darts
And like
at a
we
wall.
called it, and at first I was sort of like, "Ooh, this could be cool." I mean, in some parts of it have been kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Given the flexibility to try new things, but I will agree about the like outside of series, we haven't really gotten any solo movie yet.
And even the series kind of feel like they're test proving grounds for other characters and other ideas that are not 100% trying
Moon
to.
Knight, as we discussed, it
Right.
seems very much self-contained by comparison.
But whereas Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it's like, well, let's see if he works as Captain America. If we can get a Dark Avengers going with U.S. Agent and maybe Kate Bishop and some other stuff from Hawkeye. I don't know.
I wonder if they're not trying to try too many new things at once.
That might also be the case because, like, Eternals apparently introduced a whole bunch of things that have thus far gone nowhere and not been
Same thing with
referenced.
Shang-Chi.
Yep, same thing with Shang-Chi. And it's like, guys, could you just have an idea and stick to it? That's how you got successful in the first
Because when you
place.
think, when you think of the original Avengers films, like, okay, here's Thor, here's Captain America. Well, first of all, here's Iron Man.
It's like, if we can make Iron Man work, and then if we can make Thor kind of work, and if we can we know we can make Captain America work, but then if we can make them all work together, then we know Thanos can work.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like, they had distinct steps they were taking
Yep.
to set up. They had
They're relying on their momentum too much to try to build up new things.
yeah, which is not what the first one had. The first arc, the whole Thanos arc, had to build everything. It had to earn it.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing currently is feeling like they're earning it. They're just coasting.
Yeah. Which, when you distribute force across too wide of an area, it becomes less effective.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the direction of the MCU right now. But
yeah, honestly, I'd like to see them try more creative pieces and just
yeah,
give up.
self-contained creative
Like
pieces.
there isn't, to my knowledge, any other like huge, synthetic Avengers arc, or like things where you get a whole bunch of different things together. like there was with the
with
Infinity
any
Saga.
with anywhere near as satisfying a climax.
The only thing I can dredge up from the bottom of my mind is Secret Wars, which, I mean, you can make that work, but I'm not sure if they will now at this point.
Yeah.
And like after Thanos, it's hard to
like how do you
step
follow
down
that
from
up?
that. I mean, you could make Doctor Doom work with Fantastic Four.
Yep.
You could theoretically make Galactus into a threat like Thanos, but really,
It's more related to their heroes and not part of an overarching like. Is overarching or overarching?
Depends on. I don't think it matters really.
Okay. Anyway, I always wondered about that. But at any rate, like they can have their self-contained battles that are, yes, they're in the universe, but like you don't need to know anything about the universe to understand why the Fantastic Four are fighting Doctor Doom, for example.
although Doctor Doom has been a very large Marvel villain in the past,
Right.
so they could make him an Avengers level threat.
True.
But
Do you think if they were to introduce Fantastic Four, they would have to do it in such a way where like Doctor Doom comes later, or should they just go right into Doctor Doom?
take your time,
Yeah.
build up to something.
Make us care about them first,
Yeah.
and then introduce your.
Because
Avengers level threat.
something the Fantastic movies have failed to do so far. To make you
I
care
think
about
we
the
bring Chris
Fantastic
Evans
Four.
back for round 3.
Because why not? I remember all I never watched the movies, but I remember the Burger King toys of the Fantastic Four era. Especially I had like the Burning Man. I mean,
The Burning
the
Man.
Human Torch.
the Human Torch. Yeah.
It just
The
occurred.
Human Torch Music Festival.
Yep.
It just occurred to me that Silver Surfer would be a lot of fun in Guardians of the Galaxy.
You know,
Introduce him there. Introduce the Fantastic Four in their own movie. And then build up to Galactus with that. Because Silver Surfer can be cool. It's just dumb and 80s enough to work in Guardians.
yeah. From what I've seen so far of like the trailers and stuff for Thor, it looks like it's a natural evolution from the Ragnarok Thor.
Yeah.
And it's Taika Waititi. I mean, you know, it'll probably be good.
This is one of the best movies I've ever made.
So have either of you seen the teaser trailer for the She-Hulk Attorney at Law show?
No.
It looks a little janky.
I got like uncomfortable girl boss vibes from it. I'm like, this feels 2016 in
Yeah. Oh, that's a
Things.
cardinal right there in the tree behind us audibly as we look.
I don't see a
Okay,
highly
bird
ranking
cardinal.
bishop.
What's up, dude? Just hanging out. I was wondering what that noise is. I'm very distracted by this bird, but you don't see these guys too often up here.
Once in a blue moon.
Yeah.
Oh, they're red.
Hello, Cardinal. You look nothing like crap. Which was the one I served mass
Burke.
for? Burke, Cardinal Raymond Burke, but
Raymond
You're-
Cardinal Burke.
Raymond Cardinal Burke.
For some reason, the proper way to say that is first name, title, last name. It doesn't make sense to me, but that's how they do it.
Yeah.
Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Yeah, Raymond the Cardinal Burke. The Cardinals just need to have wrestler names.
Stone Cold. I don't know. Cardinal O'Malley. You know, that'd work. All the cardinal names that are coming to mind are the ones that are, you know, in the news for financial mishandlings and
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So if that bird has any financial mishandlings, you'll probably be seeing
the
him
pillar
in
will
articles.
be doing some reporting on that fellow.
An expose on cardinals and embezzlement of church funds from bird feeders.
That's why he's across the block from the Newman Center.
Oh yeah. He's keeping an eye on things. What's unnamed developing company doing over there anyway? Not their job. Speaking of not really doing our job, we're the Palladium Papists. I'm James.
I'm Nathan.
And I'm Riley.
And speaking of speaking, we have a philosophical today. We're talking about the King's Speech.
In a world where one man will decide whether to pull a lever and kill one man, or not pull a lever and allow 5 people to die, find out in Philosophical.
What a fluid transition.
Thank you.
Speaking of speaking,
I put some effort into that this time. If the last couple of episodes are giving you freshman year communication class vibes, like this episode and last week, you're welcome. You can give us the $90,000 or the well, I suppose for everyone it's
Adjust for inflation.
$5,000 if you don't mind. Because we had the communication related stuff with Arrival last week, and now we're doing public speaking. What's next?
We're
English
getting you guys
composition.
Your COMM 101 degrees.
We're
We'll
gonna
do Dead Poet Society next week.
Followed up with To Kill a Mockingbird or what?
Yeah.
That's more of a law course.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Anyway, The King's Speech.
So, The King's Speech, a movie which came out in 2010.
Holy crap.
Yeah, that's 12 whole years
Well,
ago.
Like in my brain,
it was
it's still a
produced by
pretty
the
new
Weinstein
movie.
Company, so he was still in good,
in good standing
good
in the world
standing.
back then.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Anyway,
In spite of that, it's
a good
It's a
movie.
very good movie.
Mhm.
So,
otherwise we wouldn't be talking about it of our own decision.
right. We would have-
Anyway.
well, we might, but we're saving that one for a rainy day.
So who is the king and what does his speech
The
have to do with
king
anything?
is King George VI, who is not yet King George VI as of the beginning of the movie. But his speech is, well, a lot of them.
Impeded.
And his speech is impeded. He has a stammer, which he has had from his youth. And so his older brother David and his father, the King George V of England in the mid-1920s, they're all existing, doing things as you do in the post-World War I world. And his dad is Albus Dumbledore.
The recast because the first one died, so yeah.
Yes.
And then the character died.
And then the character died.
And
they
this
had an
one
atheist
dies as well.
funeral for him.
And this one dies as well.
But that's neither here nor there. He's not dead yet.
Not quite dead.
Not quite dead. So, yes. King... Well, he has like 5 names, so we'll just call him Bertie. Because that is the name by which he is known
He's
by one of the other main characters of the movie.
yeah. It's short for Albert.
Short for Albert.
Which, to those of you up on Royal English history, was the name of, I believe, his great-grandfather. But anyway.
Don't ask me. I do not care about British royalty. Except when they happen to coincide in good movies.
Yep.
So, he has a speech impediment, and his older brother is off gallivanting, being whimsical and such, not really participating in his royal duties of
Does not
addressing...
care one whit.
Does not care one whit about his duty in the course of British public affairs.
And Bertie, as much as he would like to engage with his duty, he has difficulty engaging with it due to his
It requires
speech
a lot of
impediment.
public speaking, and with a speech impediment, that becomes very difficult.
So he's like sought the help of pretty much every speech therapist, doctor man's that the royal
That the kingdom
King
can
will
dredge
hire.
up.
yeah.
Lots of quacks and phonies who are just out for the money.
Shoving marbles in his mouth.
Mhm.
Oh, smoking loosens your vocal cords and allows you to relax.
Yep.
Yeah.
We don't know
That's
that it
good
causes
advice.
cancer yet, but
Yelling, particularly for this king, because I believe he died of like lung cancer. Anyway, and lots of yelling at him, and it's all very stressful.
lots of yelling. Yes. So, Bertie is not having a good time, and he is, his wife, Elizabeth, is, or something like that. I don't know. She probably also has several names. But,
But Elizabeth's the current queen. This is her dad.
yes. But, his wife seeks out this, practitioner of speech therapy who is known to have unorthodox methods,
But
And-
also good results.
but also good results. And obviously nothing else has worked to this point, so we may as well give it a shot. So Bertie goes down there and
Incognito at first.
incognito as the Johnson family, because that was the name they used in the war so that people didn't know where the king was moving.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes there and they have a little trial run.
With Lionel, the speech therapist.
Yes, who insists upon being called Lionel and not
Barbosa.
Doctor whoever. I forget what his last name is.
It was
Luger or
alliterative.
something.
Alliterative. It might have been Logue.
Logue. Yes.
Yep.
Logue. Yes. So he wants to keep things on friendly terms and keep them as equals so that the practicing goes more smoothly.
At this point, it's been revealed that he's actually working with who is then the Duke of York, which is basically the second in line to the throne. Because I believe at this point
He was not aware yet that he was going to be working with the Duke of York.
Mm-hmm. At this point, has the older brother ascended?
No, that's a little bit later.
This has not happened yet.
Okay.
So their trial run appears to go poorly,
Mm-hmm.
but Lionel has made a recording of Bertie speaking
One that he couldn't hear because he
had headphones on and it were
Mhm.
blaring loud 20s music like you do. And he just takes the record and doesn't listen to it because he's convinced that nothing worked. So later he's having real sad boy hours at home, is like not having it with whatever ragtime jazz record he's listening to, so he pops in the other thing. And it's like him perfectly reciting this passage from Hamlet.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, okay, obviously this works. So they go back, they have some more speech therapy, and they have kind of a tense relationship because Bertie has a bit of a temper,
Mm-hmm.
and he also is kind of been dealing with this for a long time
Mm-hmm.
and is frustrated because he can't really seem to get anywhere.
And due to a lot of pressure from his family and people that are not very sympathetic to his disability.
But there's also a note of like personal pride in his status. It's like, don't call me Bertie, you'll call me your
That's what
Royal
my family
Highness and
calls me.
Sir. We're not gonna, do any personal stories or anything like that. We're just gonna do the exercises and work on my
Just the mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
You want mechanics? We'll do mechanics. So they do plenty of mechanics. But Lionel has a sense that there's several other deeper causes to this thing
Mm-hmm.
because that's his experience in what he's worked with.
Because people seldom like start speaking with the stutter. It usually comes on at like
Yes.
5 or 6.
He says that no one has ever been recorded as beginning speech with a stutter. It always begins at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So he's got that sense, but, there's not a lot of openness on His Majesty's part to talk about those things. He's convinced it's purely a mechanical issue and all of that will solve things. So they do a montage of mechanics work and all of that seems to help, but when he comes time to make big speeches, he still flounders. And so he kind of boils over a bit when they're working at one point, and he's like, there's nothing I feel like we can do with this. And Lionel starts poking at the core of that issue.
Mm-hmm.
And he reveals a number of things like, Bertie's probably left-handed and had that whipped out of him at a young age because, everyone's got to be right-handed because the left hand is for the devil
Mm-hmm.
in Bible-thumping Anglican fashion.
Particularly if you're a member of the royal family and everything must be perfect.
Yes.
Speaking of everything must be perfect in the royal family, let's talk about Bertie's brother.
Yes, David. He is...
Also, didn't like the family nurse particularly didn't like him and preferred his older brother, I believe.
I think
was
that's
another
revealed
thing.
a little bit later
Yeah,
in the story.
That
but
is,
yes.
they do talk about that later, but yes,
Okay.
that's in there. So, David is, as we said, a bit of a party animal, a bit of a, rule breaker, a bit of a shunner of tradition, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And he intends to marry this woman from Baltimore.
She's an American.
First offense is being American.
Second
offense
offense
is
is
being
currently being married
currently being married
and having been divorced once already.
twice already.
No, this would be the second divorce.
I
Before
I thought they said it was twice already, and this would be the third.
whichever one it is, it's not.
Regardless,
cool.
it is non-kosher, despite the fact that the Church of England began over a
Divorce.
divorce
Yeah.
spat. Let's not address that point.
let's not get into that hubris.
Anyway,
I think it only recently became legal for a member of the royal family to marry a Catholic. Like in the last decade. Anyway.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, all that's going on in the background, and George V's health is steadily declining. He appears to have some kind of dementia type thing, and they transfer his guardianship to someone else and all of that fun stuff. And he dies shortly thereafter. So now it's time for David, being the eldest brother, to ascend to the throne, which he does. And he's not particularly concerned, at least ostensibly, about the things of the state.
Despite the fact that it's like the 30s now and Hitler's a thing.
Hitler is definitely a thing, and people are out there saying like, oh, he's just doing Germany things.
A little too sympathetic to the Nazis.
A little bit. One of Hitler's people is sending Miss Simpson, flowers every day or every week or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's not good.
Nope.
Also, he's a very well-spoken guy.
He is. He's quite charismatic.
Kind of a smooth talker.
Yeah.
Able to rouse people with his ability to speak publicly, which is a good weapon to have in wartime.
Indeed. So, it eventually comes to a point where he's made his intention to marry Miss Simpson quite clear, and the
Parliament's like, nah.
No, you can't. If you want to go through this, you're going to have to abdicate. He's like, okay, gotcha, doing it. And so he abdicates the throne in favor of his younger brother.
Basically exiles himself to America and screws over his brother in the process.
Yep. He says, hey, brother, you know that
Hey,
thing
brother.
you're not very good at? You're going to be doing that nonstop for
You
a
know
bit
that
here.
throne you never wanted and you want to just live a quiet life? Psych.
Sucka, here you go.
Mm-hmm.
So he becomes George VI. That is the name he takes. And yeah, so he's got to make all kinds of speeches, and he's improving over time with his work with Lionel.
They do have a couple of like falling outs and arguments and spats over the course of their training. There was one prior to him taking the throne where Lionel was like, you know what, you could be a good king if you applied yourself and really opened up. And
he's like, I don't want to be king.
And also implying that you think I should be king while there's already a king on the throne. That's
treason,
right? It's treason. Then.
Remember that thing I told you about being king? Well, it looks like you're about to be king.
And there is kind of a sense from Lionel that he is pushing Bertie to be great when he doesn't really want to be.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of trying to force him to do something he's not interested in doing. And so that makes the king
puts up
to
more
be,
barriers.
Yes, it makes him resentful and unwilling to cooperate with the training.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have a big falling out over that, and yeah.
But now that he realizes he's king now and needs to do a lot more speeches, like, oh crap, I better go call Lionel up again
And apologize for my tomfoolery.
and Lionel in turn apologizes for his tomfoolery
So they have a fresh start.
They have
just in time for the coronation speech.
which is not a terribly long speech. So, but it's a high pressure moment, like the whole country is watching and even beyond into all of the colonies.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big deal.
And also there are enemies that have their eye on the Great Britain and like eyeing them up for size. So
even though this guy has zero to do with the state's actual
As a
function,
national symbol,
as a
basically.
figurehead of the British people,
Yep.
yeah, that's important.
He's sort of a symbol of the national spirit.
There is a bit during the setup for the coronation ceremony, where the archbishop of their church, he's like, oh, this guy, I've never met this guy in my life. I can't vouch for Mr. Lionel. Yeah, I can't vouch for him. So I'm gonna do some research and find out he's not actually a doctor, and then tell the king.
This man has no credentials. He's like, I never called you. I was the one always calling you doctor. You never said that. I see now why you didn't say that, because you're not a doctor. You have no such license. You are not one. He's like, yep, I never claimed to be, but I have experience, because these guys that came home from World War I were traumatized, shell-shocked from what they had seen in war, and they came home unable to speak, and he worked with them. And so his body of experience in working with those people is what he has brought into his practice.
Because he also helps like kids and people like that. And actually, I think when one of the times when Bertie's wife goes to like try to set up the appointment, he sends like one of his students out there to talk to her as like basically like, yeah, he'll take your appointment now. Like, so he
to give him practice interacting and speaking sort of impromptu.
So he's got a great body of work to prove like his capability.
And so, you know, his willingness and openness with that sort of reinforces King George VI's trust in him. And he tells off the archbishop, who's kind of breathing down his back about Lionel and saying, you know, back off. He's going to be my dude.
And
So
isn't it like after this point they have a conversation about like at one point Lionel sits down in like the royal throne that they're going to be using for the coronation. And he's
Yep.
He's like,
That-
get out of that. That's mine. He's like,
that's
what you
St.
going to do
Edward's
about it, fool? He's like, you know, he has his little bit of stuttering, and then Lionel's doing this to get him riled up
because he knows he speaks more clearly
when he
he's
gets
angry.
angry. He speaks more clearly.
When he's centered and focused, because like that, yeah.
Yeah, the way the shot is framed in that scene is just great, because it's just like Lionel dead center in the.
He's like turns around and is like, "What are you doing on that chair?"
He just screams, "I have a voice." He's like,
Or, no, listen to me. Why
Listen
should
to
I
me.
listen to you? Because I have a voice.
Yes,
you do.
Get
And that
over
was the whole
here.
point.
And then he, graciously stands up and they start working with the speech, and it's all good. And he gets coronated king and all that stuff. And then the Fire Nation attacked.
And then the Fire Nation attacked.
So World War II has begun, and England is like, "All right, well, we're gonna fight them. We need King George to explain this to the British people over the radio," which at that point was sort of the premier medium.
Right.
TV wasn't really a thing just yet.
Didn't-
Like it existed, but it wasn't
yeah,
like
it was not anywhere near as widespread.
yeah, radio was like ubiquitous. So he's set to deliver a big speech to the people of the country explaining why they need to go to war.
And it's 3 minutes, 2.5 pages. He just needs to do it. And so Lionel shows up, coaches him, gives him the confidence boost. They go through their exercises. He sets up the studio they're recording him in, so that he's like darkened all the windows and enclosed the space so nobody's watching. He's hidden the little beep, the little light that shows that they're on air, because it's like that's another just having that on
Distraction and
is a
like
distraction and pressure.
But he opens the window because they use that as like for one of the like losing that like inhibitions by like singing out a window was one of the exercises. So
And
he's
so-
using all these little things that they've done together to build up to this point.
Yeah, it's
see all
like
the
a
pieces come
synthesis
together.
of all of the different techniques and exercises that they have done up to this point, all implemented in this one speech. And it doesn't go perfectly, but it goes well enough.
And as it starts off kind of rocky with him starting and stopping and choosing his word and stumbling over a couple of words, but as it goes, he kind of gains
it unintentionally
confidence.
gives him gravitas as well with the pauses.
Yes, which that's another thing he mentions. Like, let there be pauses. This is a solemn moment. But like as it goes, he becomes more steady and more like confident in his speaking, and it ends better than any other speech he's ever done.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see some shots of him throughout other political interactions, and his confidence seems to be much higher. And yeah,
And everyone views him with this air of respect that they never really gave him before, aside from his wife, obviously, and kids.
And it's not really part of the movie, but I think one of the things that would kind of underscore his confidence is that, and like his sense of duty to the British people is like during the war, they were like, well, because of all the bombing and stuff, should we move the royal family to Canada? Which at that point was still like part of the Commonwealth of England, more or less, even if it was independent. And like, he's like, no, I want to stay here with the people and give them my confidence in them. So
yeah,
he could have taken the easy way out, but he didn't.
End of speech, end of movie. After like a couple of, you know how biopics are, they throw a couple paragraphs about what they did with the rest of their lives and credits.
And they all moved to Santa Monica and became street musicians. So I guess what are some of the things we liked? One of my favorite scenes in the movie.
The swearing scene?
The swearing scene in the movie.
Because when he gets angry and swears, he doesn't stumble over his words. He's just getting stuff out there, right?
Well, he's just hanging out, and Lionel's just hanging out in his office with his two boys, and he's like, "Oh
The
crap, a
boys are in
client's
the
coming! Get out of here! Go they're in the next room." They don't know who's in the next room, but all they can hear is just like this incredibly angry swearing.
Is everything
You're
all right
like-
in there, Dad?
yep, perfectly fine. Don't mind us. Just the King of England.
Yep.
And he's just pulling out progressively harsher swear words.
Mm-hmm.
And then during the final like scene where he's prepping and psyching himself up for the last,
Lionel's giving him like prompts and stuff, like, and he's just like
he'll just
mouthing swear words.
to give him that rhythm, that sense of it's really great.
Mm-hmm.
So not only is it like a really strong like character moment, but it's just kind of humorous.
Yeah. Another one of my favorite scenes in the movie is that one we talked about with like the Lionel sitting on the chair and like forcing Bertie to assert himself. It's sort of an inflection point, like a moment of realization for Bertie's character, like that he is capable of being a good leader and making the kingship his own.
His voice matters.
Mm-hmm.
He's not being corrected and silenced by everybody or ignored by people like he was all throughout his childhood. His voice does and always has mattered, whether he realizes it or not.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Any other cool things in the movie that we liked?
There was something that occurred to me that I thought, but then I didn't write it down because we were talking here. So yeah.
Riley and Nathan watched this while I was at work, and I caught the tail end of it. But I've seen it like 2 or 3 times, so
Yes.
it's still pretty familiar to me. Any other parts you liked, Riley?
I don't think there's any particular parts that don't belong elsewhere.
Sure.
So
Should we get into it then?
I suppose so.
It's about that time.
Truth. What are truths we can find in the King's Speech?
Sometimes you need some encouragement to believe in your own voice.
Mm-hmm. You are
need
not the sum of your limitations. And
You need an
disabilities.
equal that's willing to listen to you.
Yep.
Someone who's willing to
Bring
draw you.
bring out the best of you.
Both
Yeah.
encourage you and challenge you to go higher and pursue further than you were. Because, someone who is sort of kowtowing to the king or some member of the royal family wouldn't be willing to say, are you really, is your heart in this? Are you doing this for you, or are you doing this because your family expects you to do this? Are you doing this because you feel like it's an obligation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everyone else was either regarding him as a king or looking down on him as the weak link in the royal line. There was no equal aside from his wife, who he listened to as his wife.
And she was the one who originally turned him to Lionel because she saw what Lionel was capable of and sort of kept coaxing him along, in her in her role as his wife. And so he loves him a lot. And so because of that initial prompting, he's able to listen to Lionel. I guess we're also not the sum of our limitations and disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
As difficult as things like that suffering can be in life, it can be just as much a source of pain as a source of comfort in a really strange way, where you can use that as like a shield to keep yourself from healing, because it's hard to get through the painful parts of healing. But through Lionel's encouragement and challenge, Bertie's able to confront the parts of his upbringing and his life that caused him to stutter in the first place.
And that's the thing. That's the other thing I had wanted to mention earlier was that it was Bertie's choice.
Yep.
He did this
He began
wasn't
doing
coaxed
it
into
out
it.
of obligation.
Yep.
Right.
Over
But
time, it developed into his desire.
Once he claimed it and made it his own and his own desire and worked at it, then that's when he really started improving.
Mm-hmm.
And when it wasn't being pushed on him by his wife or his family or by Lionel even, it was only then that he was able to meet the challenge and work through it. You can't force people into therapy.
No.
Voluntarist ethics bad.
Yep. Any other truths in the King's Speech? That seems like the main ones. Goodness. What is good in the King's Speech?
Lionel's very good.
Yes.
He sees that the problem isn't purely mechanical. It never is with this kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be one thing if it was like a head injury that made him stutter, but what it is it's all personal emotional brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
Like his patients from the war, like the other clients he's worked with, he's got to find what's at the heart of the problem and help them grapple with that.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's uncomfortable at
because
first.
If
I
anything,
don't
the
know
stutter
yet.
is a symptom
Exactly.
of a deeper issue for these people.
He wanted it treated like it was the injury, right? When it's really a side effect.
Getting your speech therapy equivalent to like, all right, just give me the cough syrup and I'll go
Tough it
home.
out.
It's like, sir, you have pneumonia.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to really drill down to the root cause of an affliction before you can really, recover.
Yeah, and Lionel's an example of someone who has a real will for the good of the other.
Mm-hmm.
So he loves Bertie in that way.
Yep.
He challenges him to become his best self,
Mm-hmm.
to maximize his potential, to realize the fullness of the gifts he's been given, and to aid him in carrying out his responsibilities.
Yeah.
And like the end card said, he was with him for like every major speech he did after the fact. Because, yeah.
Also, like I was alluding to earlier, the king's wife, which I'm just going to look up what her
Helena
name
Bonham
was.
Carter, or the actual person's name.
Oh, her name was Queen Elizabeth. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
His Elizabeth, his wife, is also very good in the movie.
Oh, yes.
Because it's sort of a point at one point in the movie where she's talking about like, even though you were the she sees him for who he truly is, despite his stutter, despite the fact he's a member of the royal family, she loved him as a person first, and so she sees that Lionel also understands there's something about Bertie himself that needs to be spoken to in order for him to find his own voice.
Mm-hmm.
And she's the one who drives him to get this help because she cares about him. Not just because he's the king, but she cares about him primarily as her husband.
But it is also important for the king to be able to make speeches sometimes.
Right. Which gives a little more urgency to it.
Yeah.
And by all, like it appears that Bertie is very much like a loving husband and father as well.
He just constantly feels inadequate.
Mm-hmm.
I think this might kind of roll over into Beauty, but there's this fantastic scene early in the movie that really illustrates just how painful the stutter is for him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he's putting his daughters to bed and they want to hear a story from him.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants to engage with his children. He wants to tell them a bedtime story that's funny and endearing and just kind of... But he can't.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's constantly stammering, stumbling over his own words and can't get things out in a manner that can really entertain them and really endear them to him. I mean, they love their father either way, but still he feels like he's having this difficulty.
He wants to offer them more than he has to give, sort of.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And then he sort of makes up his own story as he goes, because that's something, like, he's not reading out of a book. He's just kind of going off of his own imagination, which is a little easier for him to run with.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So...
any other bits of goodness we want to talk about from the movie?
Those are the major bits, because let's be real, not a lot of other people treat Bertie particularly well in his life.
No, yeah.
Aside from just the people who are sucking up to him because it's their job to.
Right. Beauty. What is beautiful about the King's Speech?
Take it away, James.
Okay.
Mr. Cinematography guy.
Want to be cinematography guy. And I will say this is something that, like, I was watching a video earlier and about cinematography because I was bored. And generally enjoy learning about this stuff. But I do have a fairly decent idea of shot composition. So one of the things the movie does really well with its cinematography is that if you've ever watched any sort of photography tutorial or videography tutorial, there's this rule of thirds, right? So you cut the film into basically 9 sections on basically a tic-tac-toe grid. And so you want to have the key points you want the audience, and it works with like how our eyes and brains work. Like we focus on things naturally in these like thirds basically of an image. So framing, that's where like the whole concept of framing comes from. So generally, this video I was watching was explaining how, like, if a character is in center frame, that is meant to convey this idea of authority, like this is somebody who should be the center of your focus and attention. Like the video showed like some shots of like Thanos, for example, coming out of the portal in Endgame and different things like, symbolizing power and stuff. Early in the movie and over the course of the movie, like at the beginning of the movie, Bertie is shown in ways that sort of break the conventions. Like he's kind of tucked into the edges of the frame and he's not given like what's called look space, where it's like, your character, if he's looking in a direction, there's like empty space between his eyes and like the end of the frame to indicate he's looking somewhere. Like all these little things to make him look small, to make him look uncomfortable and awkward. But as he grows in confidence, as he grows, more into his role as king and as a man of authority, and he's able to use that authority to speak with authority, he becomes more and more center framed, more and more normally placed in the shot until it culminates where he's giving the speech and he's center frame. Mm-hmm. And so also is Lionel, speaking to him from across the microphone, like coaching him from across the microphone. And so kind of illustrating those points we were talking about earlier, how like he and Lionel are like seeing each other as equals. And after the speech, Bertie says to Lionel, it's like, well done. It was like, well done. What was his last name?
My friend.
Yeah, he calls him my friend, like when they're congratulating each other on the speech.
And Lionel calls him Your Majesty for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing is, I think Lionel has been, for most of the movie, was in center frame as the focus of the shot.
Yep.
The last shot we see of him, he's off to the left slightly.
Yep, exactly.
So
where he's starting to take a step back and allow Bertie to step into the spotlight. So really, because that's the thing with a movie, is that like there's no like, other than some effect shots to like establish the time period, etc. Mm-hmm. there's not anything super flashy with like visual effects or anything, but what this movie does really well is the cinematography and the visual storytelling.
And it does, like, even also the editing. Like, every time Bertie went to make a speech prior to, like, that final speech, it was always cut off very awkwardly at the end.
Yep.
And, like, they did everything they could to make his interactions look as awkward as they felt for him.
Yep.
And every time he stumbles over something, it like zooms really close onto his face, where you can just like see the hairs on his mustache, like the individual ones. Like,
and that end
zoomed
scene
in.
where he's giving the speech, like you're hanging on every word because you're like kind of rooting for him to like complete the speech well. And like, and the people in England too are like hanging on his every word because he's
declaring war on Germany.
Yeah. He's prepping them for like a great struggle, like generation defining struggle with, it's something they're very familiar with. Like he talks about in the speech, like most of us like are still living memory of the last great war. So this is going to suck. So like Bertie's struggle with like overcoming his speech impediment is also sort of a reflection of the British people's struggle with like overcoming war yet again, you know, it's sort of in the way that the figurehead, the monarch, kind of is supposed to symbolize like the will of the British people, that sort of thing. So it's a great layered storytelling purely through visuals and like great writing.
It's not like flashy or very like technical. It's very simple. It's just drawing that complexity out of simplicity.
It's kind of old school that way.
Yeah.
A lot of the old movies, like they didn't have a ton to work with, but what they did work with was the camera work.
Yeah,
it was told their stories.
Like very Hitchcock camera work in this movie.
And it's like how it used and broke the rules effectively to tell the story. And the music choices were subtle and well placed as well.
Oh yes. And also the use of silence.
Yeah.
Particularly when Bertie is trying to say something of moderate importance.
Yep.
The silence just kind of adds to the awkwardness and the tension of every pause he makes, every word he fumbles.
And props to Colin Firth is like one of his best performances, probably.
Oh yes, all the performances were really good.
And then what's Lionel's? What's that actor?
Jeffrey Rush.
Jeffrey Rush. He's also very good in the movie.
Aye, that he is.
Yep. Yar.
Yar, I'm an Australian.
Yeah. I think that's most of it for Beauty. Very well made film. Definitely worth a watch. Unity. What brings everything together?
The King's speech, in terms of how he talks.
Yeah.
It's like,
but also that idea of having a voice.
Yeah.
Because there's the more concrete sense of like having a voice and like being able to speak and articulate, but that also having a voice means on a more philosophical level is like that ability to express and communicate yourself as a person.
And also your worth. His voice matters.
Mm-hmm.
Like he has an individual worth apart from his title, apart from his relationships to other people. Like Bertie as an individual has worth.
Mm-hmm. Because he has a voice. He's able to communicate his personhood. And that's like, something that had been kind of obscured both by his speech impediment and also by his position in the royal family as basically second fiddle to his brother.
Right, which manifest themselves in his speech impediment.
Mm-hmm.
I also thought it was very interesting. I hadn't noticed it before this watching, but the parallels drawn with Adolf Hitler as a country figurehead. Mm-hmm. He's well-spoken. He can rile his people up and get them to unify and do what he wants, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Bertie can't be that kind of a leader. Not evil, obviously, but like that kind of a figurehead that can rally his people because he can't communicate with them in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So having that kind of framing it as Hitler being his like antithesis.
Yeah. Like a shadow almost.
Was something that I found to be very interesting.
Yeah. That and like choosing to meet the threat of, Nazi Germany not with, like parallel intimidation and like, but rather through like his indomitable will.
This is all like historical stuff that actually happened,
Mm-hmm.
but the way it's framed in the movie and the way it's communicated have some very interesting themes.
Yep.
The way it's dramatized.
Yeah. Overall, great movie.
Excellent film.
Highly recommend watching
Yes.
if you're okay with the occasional F-bomb.
Or occasional string of them.
Yeah.
like 2 scenes, and they're some of the best scenes in the movie. So
Yeah. It's used rather
It's used to good
tastefully.
effect.
yes. Well, I guess on that note, if nobody has anything left to add, thanks for listening to the Palladium Papers. You can listen to us on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Leave a rating to let us know what you think of the show. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Palpapis. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, or suggestions for future episodes, email us at palladiumpapis@gmail.com. And we will talk to you again in the next episode. Bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.